Speaking of good or great, shall we talk about 298?
Live from the Talking Joe Studios.
Breaking out of the tank, the Mongol is free. The Mongol of Cobra Island is he. Making good use of the things that he finds. Things like a cloak to cover his behind. Genghis Khan, he can remember the days when he wasn't behind the times. With his map of the world, conquering Asia in the pages of history.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, the host of Talking Joe, the leading, dedicated, resurrected Mongolian warlord podcast. What was that introduction all about? Well, if you're not from the UK and don't know about the Wombles, maybe you'll never know. If you are new to the show, you can find out all of the details at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Now, today, we will be looking at G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 298, which was released just recently, the 21st of September 2022. Join me, as always, to discuss it. It's A Real American Tim.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Hello, Tim. And we're not doing it alone today. We are joined with a special guest. Now, today we are joined by Jason Murrell, host of the Order of Battle podcast. Welcome, Jason, to the Talking Joe podcast.
I appreciate you guys having me. This is awesome.
Shall we talk about issue 298?
Let's do it. So, 298, writer Larry Hama, artist S.L. Gallant, inks Maria Keane, colours Jay Brown, letters Neil Utake, editor Riley Farmer, group editor Tom Waltz, and research specialist Diana Davis.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Going on with the covers, Tim?
I'll do these fast since I can spend a long time talking about covers. Cover A, drawn by Shannon Gallant, colored by Jay Brown. Over a yellow sunset sky, we see the Joe C-130 and the Joe Stealth flying from right to left, and very small in the sort of side cockpit window of the C-130, we can see Wild Bill sort of saluting at us. This is a really different cover because, like just a few G.I. Joe comics ever, it's only vehicles. It's not some ninjas fighting or a couple Joes shooting or some Cobras attacking a Joe who's shooting. 2/3 of the cover, maybe half the cover, is just sky, just background sky. And I can't quite tell if it's a photo, which I don't like, or Jay Brown is very carefully sort of painting a background sky to look just like a photo. But in terms of comics on the new comics rack at a comic book store, this cover really does stick out, which is good. But what I think is not good about it is that it really just acts like an interior panel. It doesn't ask a question. It's not exciting. And I have made this comment recently about some of Gallant's covers. They are well drawn, but they don't sort of call out to me as exciting covers. And so I like this because it's so different, but it's not really a cover.
It's a strange cover. I agree. It's sort of quite unusual. One of the little I spies for this cover is that on the wing you have got the G.I. Joe Retaliation G.I. Joe logo with the sort of eagle face and star, which is you don't get to see a lot of in the comics.
Yes, and probably not the first appearance, but certainly one of the only appearances of that logo in this continuity. Cover B is another part of this connecting cover drawn by Jamie Sullivan and colored by Raul Angulo and Audrey Sullivan. And this is the one with Cobra Commander in the center and a bunch of Crimson Guards people, including Laura although she doesn't have her eye patch yet. A couple different Vipers in the background, Tomax and Zaymod in the front, and Destro's Castle in the background. This is a great cover. Different body types, lots of subtly different poses. We spoke with Jamie Sullivan recently, and he talked about the artistic influences he was trying to put into these covers, and I very much see some Herb Trimpe in this Dr. Mindbender face. And before you say Trimpe left the book before Mindbender showed up, Trimpe did draw issue 99. And standing behind Cobra Commander is a particular Crimson Guards person. It's one of the Freds. There's a weird little thing on the top right of the cover where one of Destro's anti-gravity pods is floating in front of the blue of the G.I. Joe logo stripe, and I do appreciate it when a designer at IDW allows some element of the art to cross in front of the logo. This one reads like a mistake. I feel like the lines are too thin, like it's not so far back that it could be in front of the castle, but this small, or it's not so far back that it could be in front of the castle, but be this sort of out of focus, or its lines could be so thin. This feels like a little copy and paste mistake, but maybe that's because this very faint anti-gravity pod is in front of these very thick black outlines of the G.I. Joe.
Yeah, it's
logo.
not on the electronic version that I can see.
Aha! Well, I'm holding a comic book in my hands, and if you are watching this on YouTube, then there is definitely a picture of it that I have sent to Mark to put into this. Help me out, guys. Behind Fred, there is a Cobra soldier who's not in blue and has a red logo on his chest.
I think that's Interrogator, but I'm looking at a small thumbnail of it because I did not bring that cover with me on my travels.
I think that's the Stinger driver.
Does the Stinger driver have a red logo on his chest? Yeah. Not a silver.
Gray
yes.
with red.
Okay, all right, Stinger driver. Cool.
And Jamie pointed this out to us as well. In the top left-hand corner at the top of the turrets is the mass device, partly covered up by the logo.
Yes, right next to the H of Hama, you see the giant crystal pointy thing.
I also had a sort of fact correction from last month. We said that Big Boa didn't appear when we were talking about the covers. Big Boa didn't appear in the IDW Comics interiors, but I've been doing a little reread of those issues, and in 219 Cobra World Order, with some other Cobra C-listers like Slice and Dice and Cesspool, there's a little gang which includes Big Boa.
Apologies to our listeners for getting that wrong. And then cover RI, Retailer Incentive, is drawn by John Royal and Javish Kumar, colored by James O'Frady. What an exciting cover. We are looking up at the back open of the Joe C-130. Behind it is a full moon, and jumping out at us and starting to zoom down against some speed lines and parting clouds are Snake Eyes, sort of conspicuously version 2 because of his Uzi and those 2 grenades and his visor. Scarlet and let's say Ripcord, and the cover is all in blue tones. Very exciting. Lots of energy and sort of speed and movement, and sort of covered up by the G of the G.I. Joe logo type. I think Snake Eyes' parachute is starting to unfurl.
Yeah, mostly hidden by the logo, but in the original art, it's definitely there, unfurling.
Sorry, who are the 2 people still in the C-130 who are watching it happen?
Could be anyone.
My copy's downstairs, so I'm looking at a JPEG.
There's not enough information to really say.
I'm going to say that's the ghost of...
Christmas Past?
I was going to say, the ghost of Quinn and the ghost of Billy.
I think even John Royal probably wouldn't know who those characters were. I think they were sort of a few lines to indicate a character rather than anyone specific. Jason, I'd be curious to know, what's your approach to collecting covers? Do you try and get everything, just one cover? Do you try and select a favorite for your pull list?
I leave that up to my local comic shop. I quit being a cover collector years and years ago But depending on who is pulling for my box, sometimes I get a random cover or sometimes I get all of the covers. And I'm kind of good either way.
Okay.
So this particular issue, I have 2 of the 3 at home.
So let's have a look at what actually happens on the inside of the book. And before we do so, let's give ourselves a reminder with a plot breakdown. So for a change of vocal, let's have those dulcet tones of Jason giving us the plot breakdown.
In G.I. Joe 298, in Dr. Mindbender's lab on Cobra Island, Sean and Dawn are captured twice, and then Sean is secured in the brainwave scanner. Meanwhile, a Fred series Crimson Guard, who may be Wade Collins, turns up at the docks. The Joe rescue team is in the C-130, and they find they have a stowaway, Storm Shadow. They land the plane on Cobra Island once the Joes, already on the ground, secure the landing field with the help of the stealth fighter. Genghis Khan puts on a Serpentor cosplay outfit and lays the smackdown on Cobra Commander. To be continued.
We try and start with the positive. So let's go to Jason first. What did you like?
I honestly like Genghis Khan as a whole. It did make me laugh wondering which Alley Viper is running around in his skivvies, or who pulled the trousers off of a dead Alley Viper so that he could wear pants. My favorite panel or my favorite piece, we'll talk about it later because it's at the end. But in general, I like that it feels like they're building 2 Snake Eyes in 2 issues. And everything is sort of servicing that. This issue isn't my favorite out of this story arc. It feels very much like they're wrapping up 297 as they prepare for 299. But it services well, and I think it really shows the competence and the skills of Laura more than pretty much any of the Joes or even Genghis himself.
Okay, I was just going to say there's that great little sequence with Laura where there's the whole bit where the Joes have been captured for the first time, and sort of Genghis is on his way out, and Laura can tell that it's going south, and she goes before they even escaped, she's saying Toxo Vipers, Alley Vipers, stand by. So sort of preempting the fact that the 2 Snake Eyes are going to get loose and are going to need to be subdued.
She's really been the best character throughout the last several issues.
Jason, a moment ago you said it feels like they're preparing for Snake Eyes. Do you think the original Snake Eyes who's dead is coming back for 300?
Oh, absolutely. I've thought that the whole time we've been reading 291 through 298. To me, that it screams it.
I think 2 things. One, I think he's definitely not. I take Hama at his word when he has said in letters page answers and online interviews or convention appearances, no, he's dead. But I can tell untold tales of him through flashback. And I don't know, did Hama say this, or I think Hama said this. I want to tell that story where Snake Eyes dies because I won't be doing this forever and I don't want someone else to tell that story. And it reminds me a little bit, if I'm remembering that correctly, when Marvel published Origin, the Wolverine miniseries in, I want to say, late 2002. And as justification for revealing Wolverine's backstory, which had never been revealed, and the idea was that we would never know, Editor-in-Chief Joe Quesada, who has some co-plotting credit on that series, said, I want us to tell that story because if we don't, Hollywood will. And then we'll sort of have to use that. And we should be telling it first. And so I feel like with Hama killing off the original Snake Eyes, I think if he was to then bring him back, he undoes the emotional punch that Snake Eyes sacrificed himself for Scarlet and has been gone this whole time. And if he comes back, then Dawn and Sean are much less interesting. And so I can see how, in terms of like moving pieces on the board, it looks like this is where 300 is going. But 1, I do take Hama at his word that he's not coming back. And 2, I think it's possible that besides this maxim of Hama's that I think Hama is following, I will not bring back the original Snake Eyes, I think a lot of what happens in 300 when Hama's writing 298, he didn't know. So I think there's sort of two reasons why Snake Eyes wouldn't come back.
I mean, I agree with all that, but he has told the death of Snake Eyes. And with Serpentor, he's able to wholly recreate Serpentor now as Genghis Khan. He could do a similar thing with Snake Eyes, where we could see Snake Eyes return, but not blonde-haired, blue-eyed, scarred Snake Eyes, but a brand new Snake Eyes. Because right now you have the abilities in Sean and the memories in Dawn, and everything is leading up to them using the brainwave scanner to rectify that. And Mindbender has Snake Eyes on file, and he's been tampering with new DNA. I just feel like we will see a Snake Eyes, but maybe not the Snake Eyes that we got in 1982 or 1985 or issue 26, 27, etc.
I think what's more likely is Sean and Dawn are somehow become one person, and one of them sort of physically dies. That redundancy is too strong, but that sort of redundancy of these two characters running around who are kind of halves of a character, that gets sort of cleaned up. Clean up is too harsh, but simplified.
Yeah, I don't think it's too harsh. I mean, that is what it is. And it looks like there's a very weird triangle going on where Scarlet feels a bit more intimate with Sean, but then in Sean's letter, he's calling her mom. So it's interesting. And then the very first 2 pages of this issue is her talking about keeping Snake Eyes alive, and the fact that those two are her only links back to her all but husband, Snake Eyes. So I don't know where it's going. That's just how I read it. Now I'm going to be even more critical of what I'm thinking based on everything you just said. So I appreciate that. That's what makes it fun.
The signposting is all there. It's just Larry doesn't always necessarily give you what you'd expect to see. So,
well, even in his AMA, he said that G.I. Joe is one continuous 40-year-long retcon. So he can do anything, and it'll be interesting to see where he takes it. I think it would be an interesting way to end 300, but then again, Serpentor's already an interesting way to end 300.
Yeah, the question that's more on my mind is Genghis Khan going to survive issue 300? All right, so I'm going to jump back and answer Mark's question, which is sort of your overall reaction, say something positive. On page 5, panel 3, Genghis Khan replies to Dr. Mindbender's request. Great Khan, can you do something about subduing these Joes? Right? And Khan waves him off and walks away and says, I already did that. It is not within my purview to undo the results of incompetent underlings. And Mindbender says, but, and that one panel, the exchange of those 2 panels feels like, in some ways, sort of the least important thing to happen in the issue, and the least exciting thing to happen in the issue that has gunplay and swords and jumping and gas and a plane landing, almost crashing. I'm not sure the release order of our episodes, but right around now, Talking Joe will be releasing our interview with Larry Hama, and he has said this in other interviews, so this is not a revelation, but I do think he explained it particularly clearly that when he writes, it's character first. He's not coming up with a plot like, what if I had a story where a Joe is a double agent? Or, what if I had a story where we see how someone like gets pulled into Cobra? It's like, no. Like, okay, Stalker. Stalker is this guy I know. What's Stalker going to do if he's stuck in line and they can't get the plane to take off? Well, Stalker's going to do this, and that informs the story. So Hama's story, his writing, his storytelling, is character first. And because I don't write like that, it only intellectually makes sense to me. I couldn't do it. I would immediately shift over into plot first. And these 2 panels here, this one panel where Genghis Khan says this to Mindbender is such a great example of that. On its surface, it's funny because Khan is leaving Mindbender out to dry. And here's a little sort of surprise joke where the previous issue ended with this sort of surprise that Khan was going to blow himself up with these 2 grenades if Sean and Dawn didn't stand down. And that's how this issue picks right up. And so to have them immediately break free and start trashing Cobras, and then Mindbender, very much in character, is a coward and is asking for help. And I feel like if I had written this scene, well, of course Khan is going to sort of push Mindbender aside and like command the Vipers to retake Sean and Dawn now 2-3 pages later, or do it himself because he's so intimidating and powerful. But it is funnier, surprising, much more interesting, but most importantly of all, fully consistent with his character. This person that Hama knows in his mind. What would Genghis Khan, whoever he's basing him off of, like a person he knows, what would Genghis Khan do in this situation? No, Mindbender, I already stopped them. You all stop them again. And he just walks out. And that's great. So actually, it's sort of the most interesting thing about this issue to me is this demonstration of Hama's writing process as an example of what we just talked to him about in another episode.
The arrogance of Khan in that moment also allows for Laura to shine even more. It just feels like he likes Laura a lot. And
Hama does, not Khan.
Hama does, yes.
Yeah.
Because as you noted, like she was prepared. And then Khan just arrogantly is like, nah, I'm done. Moving on. And she takes right back up. I really like Laura, and I want to go back to where she originates so that I can read more about her, since I do have a gap in the reading.
Mark, what's your opening reaction, starting with the good stuff?
So I'm enjoying the overall story, and this pops along at a brisk pace. So the overall experience is enjoyable. And we'll get onto this, but I was really encouraged when we had a character returning, who I think is Wade Collins, but could possibly not. We'll talk about that in a second, because that was a little plot line that I thought might be forgotten about. So that sort of thing sometimes irritates me when there is a sort of dangling plot thread that is kind of left open and not returned to. So that was satisfying. But more broadly, sort of. It felt like the middle of a story and sort of slightly less essential stuff happening in this issue. We've sort of moving characters about on the board to get to where they need to be for the next part, rather than necessarily it being a completely satisfying issue in its own right.
I wonder if we were to reread not just issue 50 or issue 200 in comparing 300 to sort of similar issues. I wonder how we'd feel if we compared 49 to this issue, if we compared 198, 199 to this issue. And Hama doesn't write for the trade. He just writes. And he is, I think, writing, at this point, certainly 298, he's writing a little differently because he knows he's wrapping things up in 300. But I think, in a collection, or if you read issues, you sitting by yourself with this pile of issues, I think this issue, sort of in context of the issues around it, does move story forward more than just sort of moving pieces around. And also, I really liked that this feels like not a setup for 299 and 300, but I mean, look at the things that this issue accomplishes. Genghis Khan is now in charge of Cobra. Right? Maybe there's going to be 3 pages in the next issue of him sort of more fully doing it because of how he teases this on the last page of this issue. But in knocking out Cobra Commander, specifically punching him in the face, such that Cobra Commander's face plate has a dent or a crack in it, donning the Serpentor costume and pronouncing that he's now in charge, Khan is all but now in charge of Cobra, right? Even if, you need to like radio everyone across the globe and Destro hasn't heard about it yet. All of the Joes that we want on Cobra Island are now there. A bunch of favorites, a couple of new guys, and a surprise, right? Storm Shadow. and then some of the water guys, some of the Navy guys. And we now have concrete evidence from Laura that she's some kind of good guy, that she's some version of renouncing Cobra with this whisper word balloon that she delivers to Sean in the brainwave scanner. So I think even though this issue feels a little bit like a transition issue or a setup issue, to me a lot happened, and it is the appetizer before 300, a good appetizer.
So Tim, you mentioned the Laura point, and that's interesting because it's almost like a conclusion to what has been building up over a number of issues. We'd kind of, each time it'd come up, we kind of had noted on it. So sort of the sort of look in her eyes in responding to Mindbender, or sort of muttering under her breath, and it's kind of the conclusion to that, where she is now whispering to throw down and saying, "Don't worry, I'll make sure you get away. Just be patient." So to us as a reader as well, it's now much more clear that she is turning on Cobra and will eventually somehow be connected to the Joes turning this thing around.
That was one of my favorite things from the last, not this issue, but the last issue, or maybe the last two, where they continually used the regeneration tanks to capture that very movie-esque feel of everyone's reflection as they're trying to hide or mask their emotions from those around them, but it's being caught in their own reflections.
Yes, very evocative. Tim, there was something else. Was there something else that you noticed that you wanted to touch on?
When we're in the plane, we're in the C-130, and Molto asks Muskrat for something, and Muskrat says, "I think we stowed it in the latrine." Muskrat pulls the curtains back on what looks kind of like a shower stall, but is a bathroom stall. And there's Storm Shadow sitting up on the toilet.
It's a great line from Storm Shadow.
It's awfully dry reading material you have in here. And he's reading a giant manual. And Molto goes, "How? Why?" And Storm Shadow says, "I heard what was going down, and I figured you might need a hand, especially one that's off the books." So, two things. One, who do we want to show up in issue 300 for the big fight, for the big wrap-up, right? The coolest favorite characters. And Mark will correct me right now, can't quite remember when we last saw Storm Shadow, but here's Storm Shadow. And I'm sure Hama would have found a way in the next issue or 300 to bring him in. He flies in on his own, on a commandeered, Cobra Fang, or, he took a boat by himself, or he was stowed away on the whale that we see with Cutter and Shipwreck, right? But whether we remembered it or not, we definitely want this cool favorite character to show up, particularly if the final issue is very much about Snake Eyes and Scarlet and Sean and Dawn. And also, again, I turn the page, and this is a funny page turn reveal, right? I don't know about how you experience this digitally, but if you're holding the comic book, it's on the left page. And I chuckled when I see Storm Shadow sitting in the little latrine on the C-130, and I thought, oh, yeah. Again, I think we sometimes really believe it and sometimes we don't. Hama makes this up as he goes along. And maybe in the back of his mind, he thought, I need to get Storm Shadow into this story at some point because he should be in the final issue. But it is entirely possible that Hama, who makes it up as he goes along, when writing the previous page, right, page 7, with Duke and Stalker talking in the C-130, and then we see this establishing shot of the 3 vehicles in the cargo bay and all the Joes checking their gear. It is entirely possible that Hama didn't know when and how Storm Shadow was going to show up in this story until page turn. He's writing page 8. And he thinks, oh, I can have Storm Shadow having stowed away in the latrine. Oh, I need someone to walk back there and check it out. Okay, Molto can ask. And so every single page of this comic is a representation of how Hama writes this comic. But sometimes when I'm thinking about his process, a scene like this sort of makes a stronger connection. And it's funny.
Yeah, another writer, they might have had Storm Shadow as part of the team when they're getting onto the plane and showing everybody getting there ready. If you're making it up as you go along, you might realize, oh, yeah, Storm Shadow should be in this story, shouldn't he? How could we do that? Right.
And sorry, one more thing that I hope was embedded in what I was saying, but I'll spell it out. Storm Shadow showing up in this way is a very Storm Shadow ninja thing to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with back at base, Duke saying, Molto, long range, Storm Shadow, cover girl, get on the C-130. And Storm Shadow's like, yep, I got to show up for 300. But it is more in character, or it is in character if the sneaky ninja sneaks himself on.
So I was talking before about the scene with the Crimson Guard arriving at the Cobra Casino docks, and I was talking about this issue with my brother, who'd now put G.I. Joe on his pull list as well, and is reading them as he goes along. And I was going, oh, it's cool that Wade Collins turned up, because there was that a few issues ago, there was that moment where he'd received a letter from Sean and he was a little bit concerned, and the issue concluded with him saying that he needed to go and visit Sean, and we've not seen that for a little while. I wonder if Larry's forgotten about that subplot. And there he is coming down off of the cruise liner onto Cobra Island. And so I was saying to my brother, isn't it cool that he turned up? And he was like, oh, right, that was Wade Collins. I hadn't actually realised. I thought it was just a Crimson Guard. Did you guys sort of come to the same conclusion as me as you were reading it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's possible that it could be entirely a misdirect, and it could be somebody. It could be another thread altogether. But I would be surprised if it was.
Can you remind us, Mark? When did we last see Wade Collins? How many issues ago? What did he do?
Probably around about, was it 290 or so that Sean was writing a letter home. No, it might have been 291 actually. He was writing a letter home, and that he was recounting like a typical scene from life in Fort Wadsworth. And there's a little comedy moment where Mongoose is dropping the lid of the vehicle on his thumb and all of that kind of stuff. And after receiving that letter, Wade decides that he's concerned enough that he needs to pay Sean a visit.
I don't remember the exact issue, but it's 191 to 193. It's right there, because it ends with Timber walking up and Wade not sure, like if it was Timber the 3rd or Timber the 16th. I don't remember the number.
Do you mean 291 to 293?
Yes.
Okay. You said 191 and 193. Yes, 291 and 293.
I'm an unreliable narrator. I apologize. I loved this scene because they use the panel. He uses the page turn to show the open briefcase with the old CG costume stored in a suitcase. But I couldn't help but laugh noticing that the Vipers doing tourist check-in all have grenades on their chests. So they are armed and ready, Vipers.
When you go to the airport, don't TSA... I guess TSA members don't have weapons in America. They just have uniforms. Anyway.
I'll lay down a bet they don't have grenades.
They don't have grenades.
Here's a question for the two of you, since you are remembering Wade Collins' previous appearance better than me. Is the woman behind him with brown hair and a sort of lime green overcoat or shirt, is that someone? Or is that just the next person disembarking?
I strongly suspect that it's meant to be either Wade Collins' wife or daughter who have featured in the comic beforehand. So his daughter is Heather, who was a hacker. The fact that they sort of conspicuously showing this same character at 3 different points as they're disembarking and waiting behind Wade makes me think that it's probably meant to be somebody, but it's also a chance that it's not.
I just took it as a random person because she fades away in the last 3 panels of that page, but I didn't know about Heather. So
was Wade was in Snake Hunt, right?
Wasn't he? Yes.
I feel like there was a scene where, was it at the beginning of Snake Hunt, where Wade says we have to get involved and he's talking to his wife? Maybe I'm just misremembering. I do think that this is someone in particular, and I do think it is Wade's wife or daughter. So if it's Wade's wife, this is Sean's mom, And if it's Wade's daughter, this is Sean's sister, right?
Should the facial recognition have picked that up, though? Or is that potentially a miss?
I mean, the Viper says all the records were destroyed when Broca Beach got trashed. So I think Hama is giving himself an out for how someone can sneak in or someone else can sneak in. I mean, in the previous issue, Cobra Commander says, "Why are there Joes in my casino floor?" So, Cobra's only doing so good of a job here.
I did like the panel of the Joes walking through and just saying hi to the Cobra Commander as if it was, any given Tuesday.
The other subplot here is that we've got the continuing story of the Blue Ninjas ongoing. So is it Alpha 001 or I lose track? But whichever 001 it is watching Genghis Khan on the monitor. And it seems to be triggering a visual, as you were talking before about facial recognition program flagging somebody. It seems to be flagging for him a photo of Genghis Khan, which is somewhat strange given he died some time before photography was invented. I'm
okay with that because there are those, there's those museums where they'll scan a mummy and it's this, this is what this person actually looked like because we've, run this skull of a mummy through our MRI or something. I don't want to labor the point.
It's fine. I'll give that a pass. But it's we're sort of touching base with them and he's signaling that he's still a key part of the story. I want that technology.
A detail that I like about that page is that at Revanche Base, we have all of these different views of Genghis Khan walking in the first panel and the third panel, which speaks to all of these either infiltrated bats that are Revanche bats or just tapping into the security camera. That feels like a thoughtful line included in the plot that Shannon Gallant picks up on. This view's from slightly above, this view's from across the room, this view's also from slightly above, but straight on. And for those of us who are less interested in the Revanche subplot, one page out of this issue feels like a good amount of real estate. And I am interested in what I see as a convergence in 300 of Joe and Cobra and Blue Ninjas on Cobra Island. And I have a guess that when this series continues after 300, I have a guess that the Blue Ninjas are not coming back.
I would be happy with that. Reading this whole arc, I kept all of my notes about the Revanche throughout, 291 to current, was that if you just took them out, just excised them from the story, it would take very little tweaking to have the exact same story. Like, they don't feel like they give anything to this storyline whatsoever.
Well, until we get to 300, where surely it will converge. And
surely.
Having a third faction in a Larry Hama story is something that I'm always interested in. Like you think of some Joe and Cobra fight, but there's also the October Guard, or there's also Zartan and the Dreadnoks, or there's also Destro, or there's also artificial intelligence based in New Jersey that has Ninja. So yes, you could probably take these pages out of the last bunch of issues, and the issues themselves would be about the same. But I think this does set up a lot of potential for 300. And if you really don't like these characters and this story, there's a version of 300 in your mind, which is much more sort of pure or straightforward. It's just Joe and Cobra. I don't think Zartan's going to show up in 300 and sort of surprise us, maybe. But I am, in terms of just picking a third faction, right? But I'm willing to give Hama the rope to build a beautiful rope sculpture or hang himself with this, what I think might be like one last go with the Blue Ninjas, where the stakes are high because it's the final issue and it's this big fight on Cobra Island.
Will Zartan give up the opportunity to kill Serpentor for one last time though?
Yeah, but I mean Zartan wasn't involved the last time Serpentor died, so. Well, yes, you are referring to a key scene in the Marvel run. I mean, wouldn't an equally weighted question be, will Sean or Don grab Genghis Khan and like take him off a cliff?
And then Zartan shoots them both with arrows.
I like the idea of the third faction as well. Reading this, I just see Serpentor versus Cobra Commander as a third faction, but as you noted at the end of this book, Cobra Commander is taken off that board very quickly, very decisively. Although, who knows who will come to his rescue?
I think the setup here is Genghis Khan versus Alpha 001 for 300. Because I don't think the Joes are. I think the Joes, there's a chance that they're outclassed when it comes to taking out the Blue Ninja. Because when they first fought them, it was really, really hard to shoot one, and they kept learning. And then in the artificial intelligence arc, Destro and the Baroness had some trouble taking them out, but it has gotten easier each time we've seen them recently. Mark and I have referred to this. And so what's the new wrinkle? It's like, well, this time we've got a slightly different variety of Joes, and they're in a different place. They're in a casino. It's like I don't expect like Mainframe to show up and say like, I've come up with a virus. If we can just plug it into the slot machines, it'll take out Alpha 001. It's like, no, what's the sort of new combination here? Or, Cobra Commander says, Duke, help me take this guy off the board. And maybe he means Genghis Khan. Maybe he means a Blue Ninja. Yeah. I just want to point out it's sort of a recurring feature. Maybe, Mark, maybe you can make a jingle.
I got 20 pages or so. I got 20 pages or so. If you like comic books, come and let me know. When we're reading G.I. Joe, you've lost 2 pages. Yo, Joe, you've lost 2 pages. Oh no. If you like comic books, come and let me know. When we're reading G.I. Joe, you lost 2 pages. Yo, Joe, you lost 2 pages. Oh no. So if you like Joe, come and let me know. We've got 20 pages. Before I go,
21 pages. 21 pages.
Tim wants 22 pages, but he's only getting 20.
Really, we're only getting 18.
This issue only has 18 pages?
No, the first 2 are a previously on. The first 2 pages are a callback to the last issue. They're a retread of the last issue.
Oh, yeah, but it is sort of the next moment.
Sure, but it's a retread of the last moment, because he's already said at the end of 297. And you called it out on your last issue on your last episode about 297 as one of your favorite parts of dialogue of, why would I be as scared of the dark sleep? I've already done that for 800 years. Mindbender will bring me back. And then in this, and Scarlet was also questioned, where are the ninjas at the end of 297? So the first page is, where are the ninjas? She's questioned again. I do find it funny that after all of Ninja Force, all of the 130s and 140s, she's still not considered a ninja. And then on the next page is him with 3 bubbles saying the same thing he said so eloquently in the last page of the last issue. So to me, these 2 pages felt like I was robbed 2 pages of this story, which is also part of what helped make me feel to me more of a bridge between than its own story. Although, you've pointed out quite a bit of moving mechanics in this story that are all there, but that's part of why to me it felt very bridge between versus its own thing. One of the things that I absolutely adore in Gallant's artwork throughout this book is how non-superhero and how very human a lot of the movements are, whether it's and completely unnecessary in terms of what you would get in most comics, like just the way Laura, she's not over gesturing, she just has one hand up when she says, Toxo Vipers and Alley Vipers stand by, or Snake Eyes dodging, the Viper who's trying to hit him with the butt of the rifle. Or when the Toxo Vipers are tossing the smoke grenades, it's all very... I like that style of artwork where you're taking it out of the superhero realm and it's very grounded looking, which is part of what I was mentioning earlier about my favorite part of this whole, like my favorite panel in this whole book. And you already mentioned where Cobra Commander's faceplate is broken. His left hand says more to his state of being than the whole page. And I love that detail of glance to capture human fluidity and tell the story through that.
Yeah, one of my notes is great body language on Dr. Mindbender. Page 2, panel 1, page 5, panels 2, 3, and 4. Mindbender is scared and weak in those 4 panels. And his acting in all 4 of them is different from each other, right? So Gallant's not repeating stock poses. He's changing quote camera angles, and he's modulating people's sort of levels of energy. Maybe a lot of X-Men comics or like Superman comics where someone has powers on a much higher scale. Maybe a lot of scenes don't require or suggest sort of, sensitive. I mean, look at everyone look at the first panel of page 3 where Genghis Khan is handing these 2 grenades back, right? Look at the care and sensitivity of all 6 of those hands. That's not just a process. Like, how do you actually draw? I mean, there are artists who draw very flashy, exciting, hot comics who wouldn't draw these hands as particularly. And there's some tension in what the 2 Vipers are doing. And there was not tension in how Khan's hands are splayed up. Sort of a lightness to them. He's handed them off, these 2 grenades. Getting back to this jingle that Mark, I hope, was writing in his mind in the last 3 minutes. On page 16, the C-130 lands, and I feel like on the previous page, a lot of attention is paid to how rough and abbreviated and scary and dangerous this landing is going to be of a very big cargo jet with a lot of momentum. And then Gung Ho yells, "Dag, that Wild Bill sure cut it close." And Roadblock just sort of wraps it up, and I feel like we skipped a panel or a page where Roadblock says, "Yeah, but he did it." And I don't really need a couple panels of the plane landing roughly and sort of screeching to a halt, and we cut back to, Muskrat and Molto like bouncing around even more on the inside, or, whatever it is. But I do feel like if this was a Marvel issue 15 years ago, where the story went 22 pages, and not an IDW issue now, which runs 20 pages, I do feel like this is a place where the story might have breathed a little bit more. And I feel like the momentum, not just the physical momentum, but the sort of emotional momentum of reading about this plane that seems like it's going to kind of crash, but not really. And I feel like, with a little bit more real estate, Hama might have called for, Gallant might have drawn an angle where we're up in the air 50 feet or 200 feet. We're looking down at this very short runway, which we haven't actually been able to see. We never look down at it, so I don't actually know quite where it is, how long it is. And I get a slightly better sense of how little space the C-130 does have to land, and if it's in danger of, running into the brush or a building or something.
Yeah, I don't know if that falls into I Spy or not, but the first panel where we cut back to Cutter and Shipwreck, it looks like they landed it on 15 foot of shoreline. When Cutter's looking through his...
the POV shot through the binoculars. Yeah. I'm going to count that as the C-130 landed off panel to the left and went sort of straight in profile,
taxied
and then turned a little bit to the left to show us the rear of the plane as we see it.
That whole sequence, I loved what you just talked about with the acting of it's going to be rough, but I also loved, if you look at the last panel with the imp and all the Vipers trying to load up the missiles, and the first panel of the next page where, you see the rat-a-tat-tat and the bullets hitting the ground and they're moving out of the way or getting shot out of the way. I love those little bits, kind of as we were already talking about with his character acting. This is his scene acting. I like that better than the action. I actually don't like the action of this sequence two Mambas take off, immediately are gone. And that first panel, it looks like a smoke trail from a missile, but all the Joes are carrying automatic weapons and no one's carrying like an RPG. So I like the roughness and I like the scene acting that Gallant put into those details more than I actually like the action of those scenes.
I think I can explain the
missile that takes out the asp.
Yeah, so we've got the rat-tat-tat-tats, and that's the Marjuice sort of laying down a trail of bullets, and on the right there's a smoke trail and a Badoom, and I believe that is meant to be Gung Ho, who's got a rocket. What's the right term? Over. Yeah,
a bloop gun, an under and over.
In my mind, that's what that was. We've also got the stealth jet still in the sky, so there's a chance that possibly that's still doing some damage.
Yeah, I do think directionally this smoke trail and the Badoom is coming from inland and not from out to sea where the two planes are coming from. But yes, the stealth could go faster than the C-130 and maybe it swooped around. There's the no prize.
Yes.
The no prize, Jason, is that Ghost Rider flew his flaming motorcycle around into the interior of the island and came back over the Joes like Scarlet and took out the asp from behind it.
Even without that no prize, the Gung Ho rocket
correct
makes sense, right?
Yeah. I do find the imp to be an interesting choice here because the imps, I don't know if you guys have an imp in your toy collection, but all of the yellow in the middle of those missiles are mines. So the imp is meant to fire this missile and it drops all the mines. Carpet bombing, right? And instead they're using it to fire at a C-130. So I find that interesting. I find it neat because you don't see the imp very often.
Nobody beats
It's the Cobra Imp.
Cobra Imp's a tower of rocket power.
Rockets separate to lay down anti-vehicle mines.
That's why the Imp's so important to Cobra. And nobody beats G.I. Joe, the real American hero.
Swamp Masher, Cobra Imp, and figures sold separately.
Joe!
But those missiles have a specific use that is not happening here. That could just be me nitpicking, and I'm not.
No. I thought the same thing, and I feel like what the scene wants... I love seeing the imps. I think what the scene wants, rather than the imps, is a couple Cobra adders, if it's going to be a later vehicle that shoots things.
Yes.
So we're getting into I Spy territory here.
I spy with my little eye.
And the Cobra Imp was one of my specific I Spies. And one of my even more specific I Spies was in the dialogue. They say, roll out the AAA converted Imp. So AAA meaning anti-aircraft artillery. And it has to be converted because the original missiles dispersed those 24 landmines.
So Hama took care of this.
Took care of it, yeah. It's done.
There you go.
So the landmines are either something different or they're not armed. I have a laterally related I Spy, which is in these two panels we're referring to, page 15, panel 4, and page 16, panel 1. There's this small, tracked, blue Cobra construction vehicle, which has a crane, and it is being used to lift up and mount missiles on the imps. And this feels like Hama, in the same way that Hama and then, was it Michael Golden who first drew the Aspid, the big Cobra cargo helicopter? Does that first appear in your book too? Anyway, I'm sure someone will let me know.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
But, as much as I only want the vehicles that were made into toys to make appearances, and I don't want some generic army Jeep, it's like, no, use a Vamp, right? This is a fun little bit because that is the kind of thing that would be somewhere on Cobra Island, and maybe it would be back in, the garage or the motor pool. But, this will, some people are going to turn this into a custom for dioramas at conventions, and it's a fun, just little extra bit of business.
I had another I Spy. So in the same sequence, we see the Worms as the pilots or the gunners of the imps and also in the asps. So we don't get to see these characters very often. So it's nice to see them crop up and I guess related to their specialities.
Yes, and if I can add a detail that I think you're implying, the asp and the imps did not come with drivers. And so if you're going to put someone in them, it could be just sort of any Cobra Viper. But yes, here's a Cobra Viper who would have some of that training. There's an I Spy that Jason referred to already, which is, but I just want to call it out. Page 6, panel 1. We see the Alley Viper who's missing his pants. We see the Alley Viper who donated, inadvertently or not, posthumously, we think, unless he's just unconscious, and he's wearing boxer shorts that Genghis Khan is wearing.
Yeah, it's red polka dots. Yeah.
I can also imagine, going back to our previous point, I can imagine Hama not necessarily calling out who is piloting these two Cobra vehicles, and either artist Shannon Gallant coming up with the characters, or research specialist Diana Davis saying, hey, how about these guys? I have another I Spy on page 3. We have a 1986 Cobra Viper, and he's not Caucasian. He's a person of color, which is rare. We see it in the toy line, right? Not just Hasbro toys, but also the Super 7 reaction G.I. Joe figures. But, we saw it in one episode, maybe 2, of the Sunbow series. But here we have a Viper who's not a white guy.
I had one more which you had touched on before, that in the C-130, Storm Shadow is reading this manual, which looks like it's got Post-its stuck out the side of it, keeping place. And in the small print, it says Army TM5-685. And that relates to a technical manual for operation, maintenance, and repair of auxiliary generators.
I like yours better, and I think you're right. I saw those characters a little differently. I thought I saw what 6 characters did you see? Say that again.
I said TM5-685.
Okay, I thought what I saw was IMS GBS.
I thought the same thing, Tim. And so when I looked that up, I looked up GBS because I saw the same thing. So I think Mark outclassed us both on this one.
But GBS appears to be an Army acronym for Global Broadcast Service. Provides real-time situational awareness to commanders and soldiers. Although I don't know if Mark might be right. That the GBS might not be a thing that gets a giant instruction manual like this. It might be not a piece of equipment, but anyway. And then
it could be either, because IMS is for Integrated Management System, so it still works. But I like Mark's better.
Yeah. Either way, what we are reacting to here is Hama inserting this joke that Storm Shadow is reading this long, boring, technical book. I have 2 more I Spies. On the following page, 2 Cobra cruise ships have showed up and are disembarking. This is where we see this Fred series Crimson Guardsman, and the 2 ships have names on them, and one of them is Wakataka Kage or Wakataka Kage, and the other is Naja Queen. And Wakataka Kage appears to be the name of a sumo wrestler, and Naja Queen, I'm not finding anything that to me feels like a specific reference.
Yeah, the Naja Queen is the name of the ship that was first there. So it's the same ship that we saw previously. So we've just got a second ship arriving, and Naja means Cobra, I believe.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you. Yes. And I had one last I Spy, which might be an error detected. So
I've got an error detected, which I wonder if it's the same one.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
You go.
So last issue, Tim, we talked about an error detected and that was that the vehicles in the C-130 had changed since we saw them rolling onto a transport plane. And that was that originally a VAMP version 1 was rolling on, and then in flight it changed to a version 2 with the missiles, and so
now it's a Tiger Sting.
They've once again changed their mind. It's back to a V1. So they decided that maybe they had, what with it being the Wolverine and stuff, maybe they've got too many missiles, and they don't need to have that. So they've switched out the missile emplacement for a gun emplacement. But the really clever thing that they have done is they have changed the order of the vehicles so that it's now Vamp, Wolverine, Hammer, where previously it was Hammer, Wolverine, Vamp, which midair, it's no mean feat to do.
Was this Gallant drew 2 issues ago when they were loading up, and Griffith drew the last issue?
That's right.
Okay, some of this is coordinating with a changing team.
But I think Griffith did draw them in the order that they went in. At least in terms of the order of the vehicles, Griffith was right.
Right. My error detected is both on page 1 and a later page, and I think it's less an error and more a decision. Gung Ho has no tattoo.
Huh.
And this has come up before, and certainly toy collectors know something different is appearing on his chest when he's a classified figure. So less an error and more a decision. I would prefer that some people put their heads together and decide on a substitute. Maybe it could just be the G.I. Joe Retaliation logo with the eagle and the star, or maybe it could be just the globe half of the Marine logo, or it could just be an eagle, or a fist, whatever. But I'd rather there be something than nothing. But as far as decisions or errors go, this one did not bother me. I did notice it.
I was just having a little look at some earlier issues, and it looks like this isn't a new phenomenon, but often his chest was covered up by things being in the way. So, good spot.
I had one last error detected on a panel I've already referred to. On page 3, when Genghis Khan so calmly hands 2 live grenades back to 1986 Vipers, he says, "Techno Vipers, resecure these infernal devices, please." And I thought when reading it, well, maybe they're going to hand them over to some Techno Vipers, or maybe because he just got resurrected and downloaded all this stuff from Dr. Mindbender, he's making a mistake. And then I thought, no, this feels like a small error where the script doesn't quite match the art, and no one caught it, and that's fine, because there looks like there's only one Techno Viper in the scene.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
Is it an error in the first 2 panels of page 12 that the blackjack dealer is blonde? Because in everything else, they've all had black hair. We haven't seen a single non-robot, non-black-haired woman working in the casino until this one panel. I also find it weird that she's asking Cobra Commander if he wants, a hit when he's not playing and he's the boss. But just the blonde hair threw me off.
I think when Gallant and Keen draw these women who have dark hair, don't they tend to ink it sort of all the way black? I think by leaving it open, that is telling Jay Brown, the colorist, and us that this is a different person who does not have black hair. So I think that's a decision.
It feels like a decision because the face is also different. It doesn't have more of that hard angular face to her. She's a little more full-faced, but it's the only non-black-haired casino worker that we've seen in these last 7 issues.
I was going to say, ostensibly, they're meant to pass as human, so you would want there to be a variety of different types, so that people don't think that they are just robots or clones.
There used to be a pudding that was over-egged. You know the pudding.
You know the pudding. At first it was British, but then it was Commonwealth. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. But now there's a new player in town, a comic book writer of some renown. He's using real world examples and peppering the issues with lots of samples. It's a Larry Hammer colloquialism. He's talking G.I. Joe and all its heroism. Can you guess what it is? Is it something new? Now listen as Larry drops a slice of real life on you.
I had a colloquialism, two in fact. I had one which was Wild Bill talking about maneuvering the plane through the missiles. He says, we're about to execute a combined tactical landing with extreme jinking and weaving. And jinking is a great little term. I don't hear it very often, not nearly enough. Jink means to move quickly or unexpectedly with sudden turns and shifts. Is that a word that either of you two would ever use in general parlance?
I would not.
I know of the word jinky, which is for something that,
from Scooby-Doo.
No, that's jinkies. That's a noun.
Plural of jinkies.
Jinky is an adjective for something that's not working or irregular. Or is that janky?
Janky. That's janky.
Maybe jinky's not a word.
That sentence was a bit janky. My second colloquialism was where, I think it's Cutter as he's looking through his binoculars, he says, the Herky bird is on the tarmac. So he is referring to the Lockheed C-130 Hercules. Hercules, shortened to Herky bird.
Going back to 2 pages earlier, Mark, the panel where the C-130 has a glowing red burst from behind it, those 2 words jump out at you? Or one of them?
Fencing, flares, and chaff.
Yeah, just military jargon stuff. I mean, we know what flares are, but I feel like chaff doesn't get mentioned often or ever in G.I. Joe comics.
I don't know. I feel like I've heard it before, but maybe that's just from playing air simulators or something. Chaff is like, the flares, I guess, is the light and heat, and chaff is like a substance to interfere physically with rockets.
I just want to go back to one, since we keep saying S.L. Gallant draws such good acting and clear action in his comics. I just want to point out, we haven't said it this issue, but he's probably working against a rough deadline for this third to last issue of G.I. Joe. And, you know, maybe there's a little less detail in this issue than some of his other issues, but it doesn't look like there are a lot of compromises, and I appreciate that. And on that same page where the C-130 is launching flares as well as chaff, on the lowest panel, where we see a little bit of the ASP and this construction vehicle and then the imp, I just want to point out the ASP is really hard to draw because it's I mean, all G.I. Joe vehicles are, but the ASP is, it's some weird overlapping shapes. It's sort of like a car, sort of like a tank, a Jeep. And Gallant smartly crops out 2/3 of it. And yet there's enough of it there that we know what it is, even if it's not identified. And that's a smart decision. You know, like an artist who can draw fast is valuable. An artist who can draw well is valuable. An artist who can turn in a really good comic on a rough deadline, even if they see a bunch of compromises, well, you know, this panel didn't have as much detail, or, you know, I had to put some characters or backgrounds in silhouette, or drop them out. You know, it reminds me of that panel in issue 21 that Larry Hama will point to when he's referring to the storytelling in issue 21. It's the panel where Destro is leading a bunch of Cobra soldiers up the stairs, and Hama will say, there are very few full-figured characters in this panel. It's a lot of just heads, and that's on purpose because it was much faster and easier to draw.
Yeah, I mean, he's still drawing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different characters in that one panel, so it's not like he's skimping too much.
Right. But it makes for an interesting composition to crop out some of the ASP, and I feel like whether he's doing it consciously or not, it is a smart decision to crop out some of that ASP and time saver. And you know, an artist like him who's on a deadline, who's drawing this book a lot, I think there are dozens of that kind of decision happening throughout every issue, and we sort of don't even notice it.
Yeah. I didn't call it out, but definitely this issue feels a lot looser.
One last I Spy on the next page in the C-130 after it has landed and the Joes are waving at it. Wild Bill's window, his cockpit window, must be able to open all the way because he's waving out of it.
I did Google that. Can cockpit windows open during flight? Because it struck me as a bit weird. And generally, when the aircraft is not pressurized, so when it's either on the ground or if depressurized during a flight, then pilots can open them.
Here's another, man, if we'd had 2 more pages, I feel like Wild Bill, for the benefit of us readers, would have said to Duke, there would have been 3 panels where Wild Bill says, Duke, I'm going to signal to the Joes on the ground what a great job they did by taking out that asp from behind. Let me show you how I unlock and unbolt this cockpit window, and it swings to the inside so that I can reach out to wave to them. Duke would say something like, that's great, Wild Bill. And then you and I and a guest would talk about it on an episode. If only we'd had 2 more pages.
Did we have a favorite line of dialogue?
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
For me, it was Serpentor. He's broken the glass on the old Serpentor uniform, which I found hilarious that Cobra Commander would put one of his enemies' uniforms on display in his casino, or that he would even allow Mindbender anywhere near a laboratory without one of those like Running Man explosive necklaces around his neck. But anyway, so he's broken that, he's pulled the helmet out, and he's already ignored Commander all the way through the casino. Commander has yelled one more time at him, and he just says,
"Your sniveling voice is beginning to annoy me."
And I love that line. It's arrogant, it's superior. It is then, the next time you see them, he is dragging Cobra Commander behind him. And that is for me my favorite line of the book.
I like the reaction that Serpentor has when he sees the armor. Ayah, A-Y-A-A-A.
Sorry, going back to this, Jason pointing out the Serpentor costume earlier. Mark, you called it a cosplay costume. Mark, do you think that it is like a sort of an amateurish replica? Do you think it is a replica? Do you think it is the Serpentor uniform?
I think it's, if not the original, I think it's a professionally made uniform. It was a tongue-in-cheek description of the
because I always go back to that Serpentor corpse with ice cubes in, I think it's issue 90, that Serpentor was sort of put on ice or buried or stored in his costume, and then I can't remember. Doesn't he come out of the tank naked in like 211 or? Yeah. So presumably that's a new one made to look like the old one. If you think of restaurants like Planet Hollywood, novelty restaurant chains like Planet Hollywood, it is, I think, supposed to be the actual movie props that are on display. And so I can imagine in this Cobra Casino, it's the actual. Well, I'm thinking about this too hard, right? It is a sort of smart and convenient prop right there, so that we can get Genghis Khan into the uniform we want to see him in. And if it wasn't here, then, Dr. Bindbender would have said something like, "Oh, it's in the lab. I'm ready. It's ready when you want to put it on." Sorry, Mark, what's your line?
I didn't have a separate line beyond anything we've already spoken about. Genghis Khan has given himself a new name, Serpentor Khan. And
I anticipate action figure customs, where it is a familiar Serpentor from the neck down and a customized Serpentor head with particular hair.
I think we're probably pretty much done with this one. I think it just remains to give it a Yo-Jo score.
Yo-Jo cola, not grape soda.
It's Yo-Joage time.
Jason, as our guest, why don't you go first? We don't have any sort of benchmark against how you would normally score things, so have a way.
I'm awful at scoring things.
11-teen, 12-teen.
11-teen, yes. For me, it's a good middle of the road. You know, as we've pointed out, all the set pieces that got moved around for the final part of this chess game, but also it's just a bridge between parts of stories. So I don't know, it's middle of the road for me, but I do enjoy it, and I am looking forward to the next 2 issues.
I think Jason just pretty much said everything that I would say. So something like a 6.
I give this a 6, but not a bad 6, a good 6.
One of those good 6s, not the rubbish 6s.
Sometimes I give something a 6 because I can't give it a 7. And anyway, I don't know that I can explain this anymore. It's a 6.
I think, sort of as we're wrapping up, one of the things that I've really enjoyed about Talking Joe's is that as I haven't been reading the comics in the last 60 or so issues, you guys do such an incredible job of tearing it apart all the way to soup to nuts, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, that I'm able to keep up even though I'm not reading. And I do appreciate that about what you guys are doing.
Thanks. And it would only take you 15 minutes to read each issue.
I was going to say, listening to the podcast does take more time.
Yes.
What a gift of your time.
I'm clearly not good at time management. We know that I'm not good at time management because I started a podcast.
It's Tom Waltz and Riley Farmer. You got 2 chances left for a letters page. I'm sure your readers would appreciate it.
Okay, so I think that is pretty much us done. We will continue our coverage of the ARAH issues as they come out with issue 299, All in Part 4, which is due out on the 19th of October as the countdown to issue 300 continues. We also have a big interview with Larry Hama, which has either just come out or will come out next week, depending on how I edit these things together. So that's very exciting as well. If you've not listened to that, please do check it out. So, Jason, as a reminder, where can people find you?
It's spotty, but I am active on Facebook in, the larger Joe groups. But every other week we're doing Order of Battle podcast. You can find it on Audio Boom or, I don't know, wherever you do podcasts. I manage the Twitter. I'm not really managing the Order of Battle on Instagram. Joel is. So if you email us at orderofbattlepod@gmail.com, or you reach out to us on Instagram, you'll get Joel. If you reach out to us on Twitter, you will get me.
Good. Tim, where can people find you when you're not talking to me?
Video essays at YouTube, Atomic Abe Productions. I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, realamericanbook.com, and my brick and mortar comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts is Hub Comics.
Excellent stuff. So, I know what's coming up. So I think that is us done. But until then, remember that
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.